Welcome, everybody, to the second episode edition of our 2023 NFL Draft Breakdowns. I am Landon Oliver, joined here by the always great Jack Guiley, ready to break down some wide receivers, some cornerbacks, kind of get into guys that the Colts could target. But first off, I just want to ask, how you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing great. Just got out of Friday church service, so ready to talk some DBs and wide receivers. Some guys, maybe not the top guys in the class, but some guys the Colts might target, second, third round. So maybe some guys, folks out there haven't heard a whole lot about because they're normally hearing about the top guys in the class.
Right. Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of preface that. That's a great point you made, is that, yeah, we would love to talk about, the Devon Witherspoons, the Christian Gonzalez guys, but this is more geared towards guys that the Colts could target and that should be there in that second, third, fourth, maybe even fifth round. So that's kind of what we're doing here, is how it kind of relates more to the Colts as opposed to breaking down the very top of the draft, because we don't expect the Colts to end up, picking a DB or a wide receiver, fourth overall or wherever they end up picking there early on. So we do have a stacked card, though. A lot of really great names that have been tied to the Colts now for a few months. Obviously, some high RAS scores, as we know Chris Ballard loves that athleticism. So let's get into our wide receivers first. And we're going to start here with a guy that not a lot of people have really been talking about, at least from what I've seen, but he's a guy that I've really enjoyed watching over the last few years. Obviously dealt with a little injury issue, and he kind of came back towards the end, towards the middle end of the season. And I just think there's a lot to work with there with him. And that is Cedric Tillman, the wide receiver from the University of Tennessee, playing in that Josh Heupel offense, the four verts, split wide, offense. A lot of fun to watch from the wide receiver aspect of it, because these guys are just going.
Yeah, exactly. And, the guy that gets a lot of love or a lot of the hype so far in this draft process has been Jalen Hyatt, his teammate. Cedric Tillman was actually supposed to be the guy there this year before he kind of, went down with injury, had to spend a little bit of time recovering. And then Hyatt kind of took the spotlight in that Alabama game, as I'm sure a lot of folks remember. But Tillman now, later in this draft process, has really risen up boards as opposed to Jalen Hyatt. Some people actually think he might go before Hyatt now. Just because, he's a bigger physical receiver in a draft that lacks those bigger type of guys. There's a lot of small guys in this class, lighter guys. Tillman's kind of the opposite of that. So he might actually rise up just because of his body type, body composition, and the strength that he plays with.
Yeah, very much. Like, you hear about guys that play like power forwards or centers where they, can box guys out and stuff. And to me, like, he does that really well. And so that's actually something we're about to see here in this next clip. So like always, we do have some film now. It's not going to be as in-depth as the quarterback position was last week, just because there's a lot more guys to get through, and we don't have the luxury of, as much as we would love to hang out with you guys for 3-4 hours doing this. But, we've got one clip per guy, kind of show you a little bit of what they do well and how they could fit with the Colts and what the Colts need. So first off, let's get to Cedric Tillman's play here. Let's watch through it. And then, Jack, I want you to tell me what you see from this. Because if you guys did not know, Jack is a college football player, extremely bright guy, super smart. I love the conversations we've had so far. I've learned a lot from him, and I know you guys will too. So I'm really excited to kind of feature him throughout this draft process as we go through. So let's watch the tape, see what you see, and let's see how it goes.
Yep.
All right, so first off, let's get started. If you did not know, the yellow arrow indicates Cedric Tillman. We should have this for all of the tape of all of the guys. We will have an arrow, so that way you guys can follow along in what we're going to be watching. So right now, and this is Hendon Hooker, and I believe this is the Pitt game from earlier this season. So this is recent as well. So let's take a watch here and see what happens.
Yeah, great play there. Just first thing I want to point out here. If we want to see the end zone angle, we can do that too. But first thing I just want to kind of point out is kind of going back a little bit of an aside to our conversation about the Tennessee offense from Tuesday. You can see these really wide alignments the wide receiver playing at. They're way outside the numbers here. So it's just a little something that you won't necessarily see in the NFL too often. But Heupel obviously loves to get the defense spread out. And so, here, just kind of the same thing with these Tennessee wide receivers is there is going to be a little bit of an adjustment in terms of what they're facing in the NFL because they're not going to be this far outside of the numbers when they're lining up. But as we can see, this is just a classic play of Cedric Tillman using that 6'3" frame to go box out a smaller cornerback and being like a basketball player, like you said, Landon, a power forward and going up. And this is exactly what he can do. I think this is why he's rising up draft boards is because, there's just so many smaller guys in this class. The other thing about Tillman is he always displays great hands, plucks the ball out of the air, very few drops on tape. But yeah, I mean, Tennessee's obviously featuring him here in this play to get solo coverage, man coverage. So he's, matched up one-on-one, and then it's just, a pitch and catch, throw the ball, let your guy go get it. So real great play here.
Then you can kind of see here how he does kind of box out this guy. You can kind of see this is a perfect angle right here of the box out. And this is the kind of stuff that you want, especially in the end zone. He's a big, powerful guy, like you said. I mean, I believe 6'2", 6'3", right around there. I don't have the official measurements here right in front of me. You might.
I don't necessarily, but I know his unofficial measurements. He's a bigger guy. He's like 6'3".
Yeah. I thought it was around 6'2", 6'3". So, yeah. But you can kind of see here where his game really shines, and that's at the most important part, and that's in the red zone, and that's scoring touchdowns. And that's something that he's done really well throughout his career at Tennessee. And all you really have to do is just kind of throw it up, and like you said, he just kind of plucks it out of the air there. But another part of this that I was really impressed with was the physicality in the route. You can kind of see the DB kind of try to get his hands on him and bump him here. You can see here he just pushes him basically out of the way. I mean, might be offensive pass interference. Some guys might call that. I personally don't think it is because that's just hand fighting. I mean, that's just football. I mean, it's a physical sport. That's what's going to happen. But his ability to just kind of play through contact and to rise, and not only that, but he also has a lot of speed for his size as well. So this is a guy that can take you vertically as well. So yeah, I just think the way he would fit with the Colts, maybe not necessarily in the slot. I mean, he could be a bigger slot, but he's just another weapon to utilize for the Colts. I mean, who love size in their wide receivers. I mean, they, Alec Pierce 6'3", Michael Pittman 6'4", Paris Campbell, although he wasn't here, he was, 6'1", I believe. So, and he was one of the smaller guys. Then Jelani Woods, Mo Alley Cox. These are guys that you could utilize for a young rookie quarterback in the red zone that you can just kind of toss it up to and let your guys go create.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. And again, here we can see Tillman just kind of the experience here. As a DB, when you see a guy going vertical and you're trying to get hands on like that, you're trying to shade him, push him out of bounds a little bit so you know that they have fewer space to work with so the quarterback has less room to throw the ball. We see Tillman work back inside and not let that DB do that to him. So that just shows, kind of his experience. And again, just a great rep. And yeah, I'd love to see him move on the outside, getting all three of those big receivers between Pierce, Pittman, and Tillman on the field. And he's one of the guys that I've seen early on in this draft process as a guy Chris Ballard would probably go after just because, again, he does have a high relative athletic score. It's in the 9s. So he's one of the, or if it's not the 9s, it's in the top like 80 percentile. So very athletic guy, can definitely run for his size. And yeah, I think he'll surprise. I mean, he could honestly go top 50 and it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Me personally, I've always kind of been a little bit higher on him than people, even going back, to last season. I thought he was going to be the stud this year before, like you said, the injury kind of issues popped up and Jalen Hyatt kind of took over that role. But I think coming on late, I mean, he's shown, especially last year, he's shown the ability to be that number one type of wide receiver for that college offense and that team. Now, does that translate to the NFL? Possibly. I don't know if he would be a number one guy, but I think he could be a really great complementary piece for any offense. And as we know, you never have too many wide receivers. So
yeah, just build out that basketball team at wide receiver. The Colts would definitely be doing that if they added more size.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, now let's get into some other guys. And no, so we have 5 wide receivers for you guys. We have 5 DBs we're going to work with for you guys. And these are all shapes and sizes. I mean, we have small, fast guys. We have big guys like Cedric Tillman. So these are all kind of guys that while this wide receiver class doesn't necessarily have, that standout wide receiver one, Justin Jefferson, um, you know, those type of guys at the top. I think it's very deep and it's very flavorful that, there's tons of different guys that can fit tons of different roles.
Yeah. Yeah. There, like you kind of mentioned, there's no like clear cut number one. I guess a lot of people would probably say Jackson Smith and Jigba there. But, a lot of these guys would not be in the top 10 of last year's class in a lot of people's rankings. Some of these top guys that'll go in the first couple early picks here, say top 50, top 75. But yeah, you got lots of different types of guys. Cedric Tillman's obviously one of the few bigger guys, but you've also got big slots like Jonathan Mingo that we'll get into in a little bit out of Ole Miss. But yeah, so we got lots of different flavors. And I think Chris Ballard may surprise us and may take a guy a little bit against the grain. We know he's used to taking bigger guys. But there's guys like Tyler Scott, Jaden Reed that, Ballard might go with just because that's kind of what this class is more geared towards.
Yeah, and so let's actually get into one of those guys here, and that's Jaden Reed. He's a guy that we got to see up close and personal at the Senior Bowl, just absolutely dominated one-on-one reps consistently. I mean, this nobody could touch this guy in one-on-ones. And it was just really impressive seeing like the way he stacked DBs and the way he's able to get on top of guys so quick. His footwork was phenomenal. He just created massive separation, whether it was in the red zone, whether it was, throwing the deep ball, just running any kind of route you could imagine and getting open. So I was super impressed with him. Um, I know a lot of people that were there at the Senior Bowl. He was one of my highest risers from the Senior Bowl.
Mhm.
Obviously, we know Chris Ballard loves Senior Bowl guys as well. So he is a little bit on the smaller side. He's not the biggest guy, but to me, he plays so much bigger than what his size is.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing that we know Chris Ballard loves are guys that are versatile. And Jaden Reed can play returner. I think he has 3 punt return touchdowns in his career, something around that. So he can do that type of thing. And he can add value immediately as a special teamer. Even if he comes in and is your wide receiver 4 or 5, if he's battling Isaiah McKenzie for reps, early on in his career. But yes, as you said, he is on the smaller side, so it would be a little bit against what we're used to seeing Chris Ballard doing. But another thing is he had a great game against Ohio State. He was playing really well against those big corners. So he's not thrown off by that physicality that a lot of those bigger corners, which is a flavor the Colts like, obviously. But like he's not scared, and that's something that I think Chris Ballard will really like to see when he turns on the Jaden Reed film. And he has great ball skills, like you said. He plays bigger than his size. You can throw it up, and he can go up and get the ball. Pretty good hands as well. There's a few drops on film, but it's nothing you can't clean up. Reggie Wayne, obviously a great wide receivers coach. So I think that's why Chris Ballard tends to not be too concerned about guys that have drop problems when he drafts them. I think that's kind of a trend that he kind of looks for, or that's kind of a deficiency that he believes that can be fixed in guys after he drafts them and they get coached up in Indianapolis.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's nobody better to teach people on how to hang on to the football and to go get the football than Reggie Wayne, some of the best hands of all time. So, yeah, let's get into some Jaden Reed film. Obviously, this is really something that showcases his explosiveness, his, the way he just explodes off the line, his ability to take a deep ball and to track the deep ball, which I've just always been a big fan. Like I said, I got to see this guy up close and personal here at the Senior Bowl down in Mobile just a couple months ago, and he was just extremely impressive. So this to me was a play that kind of really represents what Jaden Reed is all about. And you can just see the explosiveness right there, how he explodes out of that rep. And you'll actually kind of see a really great catch and, the way he is able to track this football here at this angle.
Yeah, we see that little stutter. They're kind of getting the DB to pause for a second, and then he explodes by them and him. And then we see just the ability to go up and get the ball over a guy. That's something that's really going to come, obviously, translate over to the NFL very well. And, Reed, just a very explosive guy, runs right by him there with that little hesitation step. Just really good work there. And, the quarterback just gives him a chance to go up and get the ball. And when you got a guy that's, not even 6 foot that can go up and do that, that's just, incredible, and something that's why I think Chris Ballard, maybe he doesn't even look, necessarily all the time just for the size. He's looking for that trait. Can you go up and get the ball, especially when you have a young rookie quarterback? Sometimes they're not going to read everything perfectly, and they might throw that YOLO ball up, as we like to call it. And so when he does that and he just puts the ball up for grabs, do you have the guys that can go get that? And Jayden Reed is one of those guys that will give it his best effort, even if he's not 6'3" like Cedric Tillman.
Yeah, and this was something that he did consistently in the red zone drills and really throughout the season. And that is just attacking the football, in the air, just able to track it down very well. And like you said, he did deal with some drop issues, but it wasn't because, like you said, it wasn't a lack of trying. Every play he really just attacks the football. And to me, this was kind of, like I said, the perfect example of a play of what he is all about. And you can kind of see a little bit closer here as we take you frame by frame going through this here. If we can, you can just kind of see how he just kind of rises up, plucks the ball out of the air. And I believe actually this was in overtime as well. So this game was 28-28 in overtime. This was the last play. And they essentially won the game due to this against a really good Wisconsin team as well. So you can kind of tell as well, he kind of shines in those bigger moments.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, even just the trust that his quarterback has in him. He's out on an island there all by himself. That safety over there, he's not going to get to that ball, especially on that fade route. So it's just, kind of with the game on the line, who we're going to go to, our best playmaker. Obviously, that's Jayden Reed. They get him in an isolation matchup, and then he finishes the job to win the game for the Spartans.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And this is a guy I think could fit, like you said, multiple places with the Colts, whether it's playing special teams, which is an important part of what the Colts look for. And not only that, he's a guy you can line up in the slot. You can line him up outside. I mean, he can line up, in the backfield as well, even taking, some of these handoffs from the backfield. And because he's a guy, he has legit speed as well. So just a lot of things to like about Jayden Reed and his fit with Indy.
Yeah, that's a guy I'd love to see. He's probably going to be more of a day 3 guy, rounds 4 through 6, somewhere in there. You never know where guys, once they get to the 3rd day, where certain GMs are going to have guys on their draft boards. But it would not surprise me at all if Chris Ballard pulled the trigger on him, just for the reasons we kind of laid out. And I'd be ecstatic. I think he'd come in right away, give you some special teams value. And just be your wide receiver 4 or 5. And if he can develop into that, that's a great selection on day 3.
Yeah, for sure. So now let's get into another guy, a little bit different, very similar in like the Cedric Tillman vein, where he's kind of a bigger guy. And to me, this is a guy that I would love the Colts to target. I know he's been also rising on board. You're starting to see some possible like day 2 talk, going in that late 2nd, early 3rd round now. And that's Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss. This dude is just, he's just so physical the way he plays. He reminds me a lot of another former wide receiver out of Ole Miss, and I know this comparison's been thrown around as too, but he's kind of like the great value version of AJ Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just exciting stuff. So, and there's plenty of plays. There was one in particular catch I really wanted to put on here, but I didn't necessarily have the game that it came from because it was one of the lesser known games that Ole Miss ended up playing this year. But it was just a spectacular one-handed catch. The DB's draped all over him, and the guy just makes an insane circus catch. It's beautiful. But this is a play that I think really shows the strength of what he does, and that's yards after catch.
Yeah.
You can throw him a wide receiver screen and he can go create. And anytime the ball is in his hands, he's extremely dangerous. He's difficult to bring down, breaks tons of tackles. Just like I said, very similar to AJ Brown with the ball in his hands, just very physical.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I kind of wanted to showcase with him because this shows a lot of what his game is about here. So you kind of see him. He is at the top. If you want to follow the, I know the sunlight's a little odd here, but if you want to follow the arrow, this is kind of something that he can give you. And just simple wide receiver screen, he makes a guy miss, and he goes and gets a first down.
Yeah. So one of the things, kind of like you mentioned, Landon, one of the big things when you think of Jonathan Mingo is you want to think of Yak. So this is a big physical guy. You kind of mentioned in the same vein as AJ Brown. He's not going to be the fastest guy on the field at all times, but what he does is he's just a physical runner, and he runs very nuanced routes. The fact they're even giving him the ball here in this like tunnel screen just shows you that what they believe in him as a playmaker. Because you're not going to draw that up for somebody that you don't think is a very athletic person or somebody that you don't think is going to give you good yards after the catch. So they obviously believe that he's one of their best playmakers on the field. They lined him up to the boundary side of the field, so it's a quicker throw, so they can get him out in space quicker. Yeah, so he's not, like I said, he's not going to be a burner. That's probably why he's going to play this slot a little bit. He has some long speed questions, but the other thing is that he's consistently over the course of his career at Ole Miss improved his drop rate. So if he continued to do that, there were some questions earlier in his career about whether or not he had the hands to make it in the NFL. But over the course of his career, he's consistently dropped less and less passes, which is great to see as you continue into your NFL career.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that you really want to kind of look for with any position is like the continued growth. I mean, it's very hard to get on board with guys whenever you see them, perform a certain way, and then maybe the next year they take a dip in production, and you really kind of have to look at the why at that point. But whenever you have a guy like this that has continued to improve every single year, that sets up a very good path going forward that you can select him and know that one, he's willing to take coaching, he's willing to put in the work, to improve because all that stuff shows up year after year for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's also not one of those guys. You're not necessarily going to see him making a ton of, catches against like other cornerbacks. Like he's not going to go up and out physical guys in the air necessarily. He doesn't play above the rim very well, which is just a part of his game that's a little bit different. But he could develop that. You never really know until you get him into an NFL training camp. But really where he's going to shine, like we mentioned, is in that short to intermediate route where he can get him in space and then he just runs after the catch, breaks a couple tackles, and you see a 15-yard gain out of something that was originally only supposed to go for 5 yards. So that's where Jonathan Mingo really shines, and I'd love to see him in Indianapolis as a big slot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he would fit very well with what they have here already because right now, they have guys that can take you deep. They have guys that can post you up in the end zone. They don't really have that yards after catch guy right now. I mean, unless they're hoping, Michael Pittman can continue to develop. I think he has some of that as well in his game. But, Isaiah McKenzie, we'll kind of see. He is a little bit on the smaller side. So we'll see if he's used more in like a gadget role possibly. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a missing piece for a guy like a Jonathan Mingo to where he can step in day one and provide production for you, picking up just difficult yards like this play right here where they're third down, they need a first down, and they're able just to get the ball in his hands and he's able just to go get it.
Yeah, and something I kind of want to harken back to with the Colts is when they would used to give Michael Pittman those jet sweeps. This would be kind of the role that I believe Mingo would take. Pittman and Pierce are both really good blockers there on the outside. So if you could line them both up on the outside and put Mingo in motion and then run them on a jet sweep, and with those two guys out in front, try to get them on the outside, that would be pretty scary for opposing defenses to try to take on, just because you've got three very large, fast humans coming at you, one of them with the ball who's going to try to lower a shoulder and run you over. I would not want to be a cornerback trying to tackle Jonathan Mingo. That's for sure.
No, definitely not. So now we've got a couple more guys to get to here, and then we will get into our DBs. But we're kind of staying in the vein of giving you a little bit of different flavor of guys. And right now, we want to get into a guy that is a friend of the show, guy that we had on interview. If you have not watched the interview with this next person, it is up live on YouTube, obviously available in podcast format as well. That is Cincinnati wide receiver Tyler Scott. Just an absolute dynamite guy. Loved to be able to sit down with him and have some great conversations. He's just fantastic. I know Marcus is very smitten with him. He's a big Tyler Scott guy. And I'm as well. I think he has a lot of value, and really what you're looking for with Tyler Scott is very similar. I mean, it's a yards after catch. I mean, this guy's just blazing speed. I mean, special teams, he's a guy that can, give you that punt returner. And not only that, but you can line him up, like you said, jet sweeps, line him up in the slot, or he can, you can even line him up and have him run. That Shane Steichen loves to take those deep shots. So
Yep.
he's a guy that would really shine in that role who's able to stretch the field.
Yeah, and somebody I kind of want to. I'm not going to compare him to this. This is a very lofty goal, but somebody he kind of reminds me of would be somebody in that T.Y. Hilton role. Now I know that's a big name to compare him to, and that's very lofty expectations. If I were to say Tyler Scott is supposed to be T.Y. Hilton, but he kind of does the same thing. He's that deep threat. He's a really good route runner. He can win from the slot. He can win from outside. So yeah, those are just some of the things that he can do. And then he can also, we can give him the jet sweeps, and he's very shifty in space, can be kind of that gadget role if you need him to be. But I don't think the Colts would limit him to just that gadget role, kind of just getting him in the short area. I think, he has a diverse route tree that he can learn and can run and can win in all three levels of the field, and has potential upside to be, the Colts wide receiver number 2. I'm a very big fan of Tyler Scott.
Yeah, and something that I've always been really impressed with too is you see a lot of people thinking that he is just that speed guy. And like you said, the way he explodes in and out of his routes and his footwork and, just the attention to detail that he shows is really kind of a hidden gem whenever you're watching him, because you see multiple times his stop and start ability and the acceleration and deceleration that he has and puts on tape is just like really special sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. He's, again, very good with the short area quickness, but he's not limited to that. The deep balls, he wins everywhere. And I think he was a little bit limited or held back by the quarterback play at Cincinnati this year. Maybe if he had Desmond Ritter for another year, he would have shined a little bit more. Maybe would have even risen up higher into the conversation where, maybe he's a lock to go in the second round or something like that. But, this is another guy. It wouldn't surprise me. Ballard trades down in the second round, picks him up, in the mid 40s. Colts fans would probably be a little shocked by that, but they're not always. Chris Ballard doesn't always do what we expect, and this wouldn't be something that would surprise me or blow me out of the water if Scott were the selection somewhere in the second round for Indianapolis.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think even the second, third round conversation for him is really kind of been there all along. And I think as more people watch him and they see that, he isn't just, that gadget type of guy, I really expect him to rise. And I do expect him to be a top 50 pick in this draft.
Yeah. Yeah. And, wherever he goes, they're going to get a great guy and a great player. And, I think he'll surprise people that don't know his name now. He's going to win again, another name that I'm going to throw out there in that kind of Terry McLaurin role. If he succeeds, that's how it's going to be.
Right.
So not necessarily, yes, he's definitely going to be Terry McLaurin. I'm not saying that, but how would he win kind of in that same role?
Also helps too, roommates with Alec Pierce,
Yeah.
and they are working out together right now, currently this off season. So he's getting a little bit of insight. So hopefully Alec Pierce is comfortable enough to kind of whisper a little bit into Chris Ballard's ear, like, "Hey, we need this guy." So
Yeah.
this next play that we're going to show you is Tyler Scott, and it really just shows what he's great at. And like you were saying, that short area quickness, and then his ability that once he has the ball in his hands, I mean, he's just a dynamite. He's a touchdown waiting to happen anytime he touches the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just see how, I mean, the way he just splits those defenders. And I mean, you're not catching this guy.
Yeah, I mean, he's pulling away from guys. This guy, if he makes a guy miss and is in the open field, nobody's going to catch him. World-class sprinter. I believe he was in the Junior Olympics when he was a teenager. I mean, yeah, just splits the defenders, makes a guy fall down.
Yeah, I mean, just look at how quick, like once he turns that corner, I mean, just look at how quick that acceleration is. I mean, it's just.
Yep, just a simple slant route. And then one of those guys, he's a home run hitter wide receiver, kind of like Jonathan Taylor as a wide receiver in terms of like he catches the ball, he could go the distance every time he touches the ball. He's that dangerous. Kind of like the next guy we're going to talk about a little bit, Tank Dell. So.
Yeah, and he is not necessarily a smaller guy. I believe he weighed in, or not weighed in, but I believe his height, he measured in at 5'10", 177. So very, like you said, very similar weight and height to T.Y. Hilton as well.
Mhm.
So that really kind of drives that point home, because even though Chris Ballard loves the measurables and he knows that, he knows the value of what a guy that plays with this type of speed, with this type of ability, the home run hitting ability, like a T.Y. Hilton. He knows what that can mean for a team, because he had that his first couple years, especially the year when Andrew Luck was back.
And again, we talk about building your wide receiver corps like a basketball team, and you don't necessarily need 5 starting centers or power forwards. You need your point guard, your shooting guard, and they don't all have to be as tall as Cade Cunningham or Magic Johnson. So,
Yeah.
shorter point guards can win, shorter wide receivers can win. We see it every day in the NFL. Guys like, he's not as necessarily fast as Tyreek Hill, but guys that are that size, they're making a living, making a lot of paychecks and a lot of money in the NFL. They're not all just big guys. So,
Right. Yeah, and especially, to me, to continue with the basketball analogy, this guy he's a shooting guard, because every time he's got the ball, he can score.
yes. Yep. Every time. And it can be from deep, or he can go up and get a goal line fade. Just like we said, he has a good vertical jump, which is very important when you get in those goal line situations. I don't think the Colts will look to him to be the first option down at the goal line when they've got a lot of bigger guys. But, if you want to see him run one of those whip routes to get open real quick
Oh,
against
man.
the slot corner, he can do that. And that's a great way to score a touchdown, just faking inside and cutting outside real quick on the goal line. If you don't want to just throw 3 straight jump balls in the end zone. Yeah, it'd be a great
Yeah,
way
and
for
he actually had a similar play to that, where he ran a whip route in the red zone, and I would have to pull it up and find it, but he made a guy look absolutely silly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just beautiful stuff. So let's get into our last wide receiver here that we will talk to. That could be on the Colts radar, and that is Nathaniel Tank Dell. And this is a dude that has heard a lot of really great things pre-draft process. Guy that really might have started on day 3, and now I think he's firmly planted himself into the day 2 role.
Yeah. We hear a lot of things. He kind of broke out at the Senior Bowl, winning a lot of one-on-one matchups just with his separation ability and his speed. Tank Dell, the one thing you're going to remember about Tank Dell is his size. He's one of the smallest guys or wide receivers. There's not really a prototype or an example of a guy that's been extremely successful at this, at this size in the NFL. But if he does, that's something other smaller guys can look to and be like, if I have great separation ability, and I can go up and catch the ball. He's also another one of those smaller guys who's proven that he can go up and snag, passes against or contested catches against corners that are a lot bigger than him, because he has that ability to leap and go high point the ball. So again, another guy that doesn't have to be 6'2", 6'3" to go snag the ball. He's got those good, jump ball abilities.
Yeah, and very explosive as well. And like you said, alluding to the size, I believe he weighed, or height and weight, it was like 5'8", 165 or something like that. So yeah, very small dude, for sure. But as we can kind of see here, the way that he wins, even in the red zone here, I mean, you can just kind of see just the way that he's able to get on top of guys, and the ability to track the ball in the air, um, get both feet down, is
Mhm.
is just really great stuff.
Yeah, he does a great job here. Defender's obviously trying to press him a little bit, and he makes him punch with his left hand, gives him that inside, move, and then just comes right back outside. That's hard for the DB to stay patient there. So he's just, real quick, real savvy. And then, good ball by Clayton Tune there as well to lead him to the back pylon. But yeah, the fact that they're putting him out there on the outside there and say, just go win. Again, this is a smaller guy doing this. And yeah, just another great rep, the ability to get off a press there. The Tulane cornerback, I believe he knows not to, try to come up and press him and try to hit him like immediately, because he's not going to win there because Tank Dell's too quick. But even
Yeah.
then, he still tries to be patient and still gets beat. So just amazing release abilities, and he has a great release package as well. You have to if you're that size if you want to win. And
Yeah,
this is why this guy is being talked about, as a top 10 receiver in this class, even though he's 5'8". So
right. And like the old adage here is a perfect example of if we're even, I'm leaving. And right now you see they're even, and you can just see the explosion, just how he's able to create that separation so quickly right there,
mhm.
even in a short area like the red zone.
Yes. Yeah, and yeah, again, just the separation ability. I think you could try to line him up there outside, or at least give him the chance to fail. In the NFL, he's probably going to be a slot guy, and he probably will never be, a guy that you want to be your top wide receiver or your second guy. But if you're looking for explosive plays at any time, any point in the game, Tank Dell could be that guy that just scoots behind the defense and makes the defender look silly, just like a few other of these guys we've talked about. So,
Right. So now that ends the five wide receivers we are going to talk about that could be on the Colts radar. I want to ask you, Jack, if you had a choice of any of these guys, say they are all sitting there in the third round, who do you want for the Indianapolis Colts out of this group?
so I kind of mentioned it when we talked about him, but the guy I've had my eye on for the longest time is Cedric Tillman. He's kind of just been rising up draft boards consistently throughout this process. And, he's that big physical guy that I know Chris Ballard looks for. And he's also a really good athlete. So I just think, getting all those big guys out on the field, then maybe grabbing a guy later, like a Jaden Reed, pairing both of those guys with whoever the rookie quarterback is. I mean, you would have defenders and defenses really shaking in their boots because you've got so many weapons with so many different options and what they can do and how many ways they can win. It would make life on a rookie quarterback a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. And for my pick is a guy that I mentioned, someone who I've had my eye on for quite a while, and that is Jonathan Mingo. I think just what he's able to bring to that slot position, the ability, the yards after catch, to break tackles and go pick up those tough yards. And then especially even in the end zone or even in the red zone, he's a guy that he doesn't really have any size concerns. So you could also, throw him the ball like you said. He's not going to necessarily out jump anybody. He's not going to go up and high point the ball over people. But if you can get him the ball in space in the red zone, he's a guy that can create a lot of touchdown opportunities for himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, any of these guys that we talked about, I would be ecstatic if the Colts got them. I think a lot of these guys will be great receivers in the NFL. Not all of them obviously will be uber productive, but all of them have the chance to be. Kind of like we said with the quarterbacks. All these guys, if they get in the right system and they have the right situation around them, can develop into good receivers. They all have the traits to do so, which is kind of why we picked them out of the crop of receivers that we think will be available on day 2 or 3.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And so that ends our wide receiver portion. Now we get into one of the positions I'm most excited to talk about, especially with you as a DB, and that is the cornerback position. And this class of cornerback, does it have the Sauce Gardner? Does it have those type of guys at the top? No, it doesn't. But the depth of this class is just so insane. I mean, there are guys that I have graded at the top of the second round, late round one, that are going to be available after pick 50. I believe I said on the last video, I think I've got 12 guys so far in this DB class graded as top 50 players in this class. And now some of that is because there's not a ton of first round talent in this class. So, it's not as great of a draft class overall, but this cornerback class, there's so many explosive athletes with length and with size that if you can just kind of teach up that skill, that get that skill level of get that technique kind of more cleaned up. I think there's a lot of guys in this class that can really shine.
Yeah, yeah, and there's guys at the top like Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon who I think will be really good players right from the jump. But the guys we're going to talk about, guys like Julius Brents and Keely Ringo, guys I think the Colts will look at in the second round. In fact, that's probably the way I think, or the direction I think Ballard will probably go in round 2, and if not in round 3, because really they don't have much at cornerback on the roster right now.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of fun guys here to talk about, and a lot of guys that could fall. I think there's going to be a lot of really good cornerbacks there at 35, Whether or not Chris Ballard actually stays there, I kind of tend to think he'll trade back, but I guess we'll see. I'm really excited to see the crop of prospects that'll be there.
Yeah, and especially whenever you have a guy that we're about to talk about here that is a native of Indianapolis, Indiana, and he is a guy that's just exploded up draft boards, especially as the combine and as the pro days have kind of commenced. You know, the size, the speed, the length he has, very reminiscent to a guy like Tariq Woolen last year, who really kind of exploded onto the scene. Now, how that guy lasted to the fifth round, I will never know because I was very adamant, even in the second round. It's like, man, they really need to draft Tariq Woolen. And he drafted to the, he waited to the fifth round and he went to Seattle. And obviously, we saw the kind of year he had. There's a guy that's very similar in that vein, maybe not as explosive as an athlete, but I mean, he's right up there as far as the size, the length, the speed, and played some really great ball here at Kansas State, and that is Julius Brents. If you want to know their measurables right now, I do actually have them handy just because he's a guy that I've actually been. So I actually worked through this DB class in March. That's usually the last position I get to. So I have all this stuff pretty fresh here in front of me from whenever I was doing my film reviews. But, 6'3", 200 pounds, 34-inch arms, which is just wild. And then on top of that, a 4.5 40. So doesn't have that elite speed like Tariq Woolen, where he's running in the 4.2s because that guy's just a freak of nature. But still, I mean, great speed, really great 10-yard split, 41.5-inch vertical, and 11.6 broad jump, which is just insane explosion. And like I said, very explosive guy. He doesn't have that straight line top end speed, but he's just so explosive. Great 3-cone drill at 6.6 seconds as well. So all those numbers really translate to what you look for in DBs with the explosion. And with a guy his size who's able to move like that, it's just, if you can get the technique down a little bit more, I really think he has a chance to be special.
Yeah. Julius Brents, I'm going to come out right and say it, is one of my favorite corners in this class, especially around the point where the Colts will be picking. First of all, he's a Warren Central grad. That's awesome, indie guy. Also, the length, like you talked about, combined with the explosion, he would be a really great zone corner, I think, to start out. But with that length and that size, he can also overwhelm smaller receivers. And you can teach him to be even better in press. I don't think he's outstanding there right now, but you can always work on that once you get in the NFL. Once you start, upping your level of competition, and you get into a good DB room with guys that are experienced, they can help you be better in press man. You're not right now going to want to leave him on an island. I don't think you kind of want to, the Colts don't really play a ton of man as it is right now. So, letting him kind of hang out in those zones, and just kind of read the quarterback's eyes and use that instinctual presence that he has. I think Julius Brents, he might even go round one. There's always a few guys that we don't expect to go in round one. I'll go back to Cole Strange last year. Everyone was like, oh, this guy's great. He's rising up draft boards. He'll go, round 3. And then Bill Belichick was like, heck, let's take him in the late 20s. So it would not surprise me if somebody in the late 20s, early 30s was like, Julius Brents, yes. But if he's there at 35, I wouldn't trade back. I'd just take the guy. So
yeah, especially if you believe in him. But like I said, this is a very deep cornerback class, and a lot of these guys, while they might not have the length that he has at that level, there are some very tall, long cornerbacks that can move, and that's just all over this class. So let's get into some film on Julius Brents here, and this play here. Let me see if I can find him. Here we go. Let's go ahead, get this open. And you can kind of see down there at the bottom of your screen. I wish I could find a way for this video player to go to get out of the way. But as we can see here, this is in the Alabama game. And really, they didn't test him a lot. And it was really hard to find a lot of people testing him throughout the year. They usually threw to the opposite side of the field that he was on. And so this was, I believe, the All-State Sugar Bowl as well. So this was the bowl game from Alabama and Kansas State. So as you can see here, the ability just to play in that zone coverage, which we know the Colts do like to do. They like to run that hybrid type of scheme. And you can kind of see he ends up really mirroring that route really well. And I
Mhm.
mean, with his length, I mean, you don't really want to throw his way if you can help it. So it was one of those that Bryce Young's just like, look, it's probably a better idea if I just throw this ball away and, you live to fight another day.
Yeah, and we can even see a slight mistake here on Julius Brent's part. He reads the route and breaks on it a little bit early before he misreads the receiver's body language here when he's watching his hips. He thinks he's going to rise up and then break down, but instead, he continues on his route, and Brent's kind of plants like he's going to go forward here. But we see the length and the ability to get still stay on top, the makeup speed a little bit to stay on top of the route. And then when the receiver breaks back to the ball, there's just no chance because, he's so big, so long that he's able to get in that receiver's hip pocket, even though he has to pause for a second because he makes a small mistake. And then there's just no chance for the receiver to catch the ball. And even Bryce Young, as accurate as he is, just knows he has to pull the string and throw the ball away. So great rep here by Julius Brents. The eyes weren't particularly 100% accurate, but as a DB, I'll tell you, it's a lot more difficult than it seems. And so the fact that
To
he's still
me,
in the rep, is great. And it just shows off his length.
yeah, and to me, outside of quarterback, DB is the hardest position to play on a football field
Yeah.
because, especially in the NFL, you have these guys that are running, like the wide receivers we showed, you have guys that are running 4.3s, 4.4s, 4.2s in some cases. And at that point, you make one false step and it's going for six. And it's basically a position that you have to be almost 100% perfect at every time you go out and play, or else they're going to score a touchdown. So it's just such a difficult position to play, and this really does show where that length comes in to play here for him. Is that, like you said, even though he did initially misplay it, that length and the explosion allows him to really kind of just plant his feet and kind of explode, use that length to really recover and force an incompletion there.
Yeah. It just again shows, how you can that length kind of gives him the ability to make small mistakes, things you probably won't even notice on the TV copy, but once you pull it back and watch the all 22, you can see it just gives him a little bit more extra wiggle room. He can make that tiny mistake because he has the length to make up for it and still get hands and then get back in the hip pocket of the guy so that he can turn around and make a play on the ball. So Julius Brents, he's going to have a little more time to learn because he'll have that little bit of wiggle room. And even if he makes little mistakes, the length will make up for it. Just really excited to see where he goes. And I expect him to be a successful guy who could also, even if cornerback doesn't work out, could move to safety. I believe he has some good positional versatility just based off of his instincts. So
Yeah, and he's a guy as well. He really loves to hit as well. So you
Mhm.
love that. Loves to make plays on the ball, but really loves to come up and tackle. And that's something that you really need in this Gus Bradley system. You have to have cornerbacks that are really willing to lay their bodies out and make the tackle.
Yep. And that's something we see out of Kenny Moore and Isaiah Rodgers, and we saw Stephon Gilmore do as well. So Chris Ballard obviously values that. And I think all of these things kind of combined just make it very obvious that Ballard could go in this direction.
Yeah. Plus the RAS score, like I said, is pretty telling on how high the Colts probably have him on their board.
Yes.
So now let's get into our next guy here on the film, and that is a guy that has really also been rising up, or maybe necessarily falling down boards, and which is kind of odd to say because before the season you heard this guy is possibly a top 10 pick. I saw top 10 picks with this guy at the beginning of the season. Now you're seeing him kind of go at the top of the second round in some of these mocks, and that's Keely Ringo out of Georgia.
Yeah. Keely Ringo, we saw him, obviously, like you said, he was a really highly touted recruit, went into Georgia. One of the guys that when you looked at mocks at the beginning of last year, right when the last draft concluded, he was one of those guys that was like consensus top corner in the class. But since then, he's fallen down a little bit. A guy I definitely expect to be there in the second round, top of the second round. He could still go at the back end of round one, but he's definitely not that consensus number one anymore. He could still, obviously, he has a ton of upside, could still develop into a great number one corner. He's an athlete, very big, not necessarily the greatest, like the length that Brent's has. But again, just kind of that athletic upside. Obviously, he played at Georgia. Georgia DBs, we've been scared of them a little bit in the past. Just in general, we've seen like guys like DeAndre Baker and some other guys that have gone rather high just kind of struggle a little bit. In the NFL, just because they kind of play that very aggressive level of defense, and they tend to get defensive pass interference called on them. But then we've seen guys like Tyson Campbell, who honestly kind of reminds me of Keely Ringo, just these very athletic, kind of unrefined coming out, and they go in the top of the second round. And then now Tyson Campbell has developed into a great cornerback for the Jaguars.
Yeah, for sure. And this is a guy, like you said, who might not have the length of a Julius Brents. He's still 6'2", so he's not small by any means, but he does have a little bit more speed. They're running in the 4.3s, and it really shows on tape, especially after he gets the ball in his hands, whether, he comes up with an interception and it really kind of turns into more of a punt return. You can really see that speed shine. And this is a play that we actually showed during the Will Levis breakdown. And this is something that Jack really wanted to highlight from a Keely Ringo standpoint that we had talked about. And that's the ability to really recognize and recover on a ball and make the play on the ball. But then once he has the ball in his hands, he can really shine here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so obviously we kind of talked about this during the Will Levis breakdown, a little bit of an underthrown ball here by Levis. But then just Ringo's ability here to return the ball and just make guys miss just kind of shows you what kind of athlete he is and why he'll have a lot of chances to succeed in the NFL, even if he isn't currently, that guy that's completely refined as a DB and all of his techniques. He's just a very good athlete and a guy that will have a chance to be a really good corner in the NFL if he develops, if he gets in the right room. Again, just kind of he has to have the necessary things, but I believe that he has all the tools necessary.
Yeah, and what's great too about this class is, like we said, a lot of them are those bigger athlete type of guys, but they just need some refinement within their technique. And luckily, with Gus Bradley staying on, so is his coaching staff. And we do know the Colts do have one of the best DB coaches in the NFL. And he's developed multiple guys. So this would be a perfect situation for a young, athletic defensive back to really step into and develop.
Yeah, agreed. I think Keely Ringo's another guy the Colts probably have their eye on. Between him and Julius Brents, if one of them is gone, Ballard might look at the other one. They're probably both going to be in there on top 30 visits. I don't obviously have that confirmed, but it would just make sense just based off these are the kind of archetypes the Colts look for when they're drafting corners.
Yeah, for sure. So now, those are kind of like our consensus top two guys that could go, especially there at the top of the second round. But now let's kind of get into some guys that might be available later on in the draft, whether that's third, fourth round type of guys that they could also take if they just elect to go offensive line, there early in the second round as well. So, like I said, this very deep DB class, and there's some great options here. And let's get into a guy that I know you have mentioned before and are pretty excited to talk about, and that's Darius Rush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Darius Rush is a former wideout, another big guy that, again, if, Brents and Ringo are gone there and Chris Ballard wants to wait a little bit, Darius Rush could be available, day 3. I think he'll be a top 100 pick, but, he could be there in the third round or maybe even the beginning of the fourth round. Another really long guy. 6'2", 6'3", around that range.
Yeah, 33 and 3/8 arms as well. So really long.
Again, I think Brent's was sitting at 34, which is just absolutely insane. But Rush is also there. So I think Chris Ballard's eyes light up when he sees guys that have 33 and 34-inch arms playing cornerback, just because, again, they have that ability to, have a little wiggle room on routes, just because, they can get their hands on guys and stay in their hip pocket. Darius Rush is never going to be one of those guys you can tell him to stick to shifty receivers. He just doesn't really have the necessary footwork to do that. His short area quickness, I don't know if that's ever going to be possible just because he's a bigger guy. So we're not going to ask him to play in the slot. He's going to be outside, which kind of is self-explanatory. But he has really good ball skills. Like I said, he's a former receiver. So this is a guy that if, they throw those jump balls, kind of like we were talking about the Colts love to do in the red zone with some of these guys, Darius Rush can make interceptions. And that's something that the Colts really value, is just guys that are able to turn the ball over. And I don't know if we can stick him in there right away and say, hey, Darius, you're going to be our cornerback 2 day 1. But, he could probably start off as a backup, and then the Colts would obviously need to sign someone, but he could develop into that cornerback 2, or maybe even I don't know about cornerback 1, but he has the upside to be a CB2, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And he's also a guy, he runs a 4.3 as well. So another really big guy, really lengthy, but is also extremely quick. So I couldn't find a ton of plays, as far as like him making plays on the ball from the film that I had available to me. But there is a play here that I really loved that really popped off the film for me. And it really showcased a lot of great things as far as the quickness. It shows that 4.3 speed, but not only that, the ability to take correct angles and just the effort that this play shows. And I love to see cornerbacks that never give up on plays, that play with effort. And that's something that the Colts, it's almost mandatory. Like, you have to have guys that play with effort on every single play. And to me, this next play really showcases that. So this, I want to also preface this saying this is not Will Levis. So before we get the hate in the comments, like the last video, Will Levis was actually out this game. This was the backup to Kentucky, but you can just kind of see it ended up just being a sweep anyway. Just a little quick toss there, easy completion for the quarterback. But you can really see here. Let me go back, highlight Brent's at the top of this route here. So at the top of your screen, this is Julius Brent. You see where the yellow arrow, and just kind of follow along with him as this play takes place. Like I said, this is just stuff that I love to see. Going all the way to the opposite side of the field and making a play on the ball.
Yeah, and just kind of looking at this is kind of what, for all those Will Levis haters out there, this is kind of something, just what he was working with on, or I guess just kind of the Kentucky offense. And that's not even necessarily him, but this is just kind of what he was working with this year. This wide receiver obviously just trying to make a play, but oh my, that's not the smartest thing to do. You probably should just go down there. But obviously Darius Rush making a great play there, showcasing that speed, the ability to chase a guy down everywhere. Even if he's not a guy that's going to start for your day one, special teams. Like, that just screams special teams to me. And, scouts will look at that and they'll be like, this is the guy I want chasing down kick returners on special teams on Sundays. And so Darius Rush, even if he doesn't develop into that guy that you can put him out there all the time on an island with the big time receivers, I would trust him to go play special teams. And if that's a 3rd round pick, special teams is that forgotten area of the game. I think he obviously has the upside to be a really good corner, but he can also just be a really great special teams player.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what we can really say about a lot of these guys, whether it's the wide receivers we talked about or it's the DBs in this class, is they all have that ability on special teams to really make an impact there. And that's something that we know Chris Ballard and the Colts put in high regard whenever they're looking at these prospects.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll always come into play. I think that's why Isaiah Rodgers got so much love from the Colts and why Chris Ballard drafted that smaller guy. Just because Rodgers was, like 5'9" or whatever his official measurements were. But he was such a great special teams player and obviously has that tackling dog in him. So that's just type of the things that Chris Ballard looks for. And I think that play you just showcased, Landon, just really shows something that the Colts, I believe, will look for and probably highlight that film. And I bet if they interview him, they'll go be like, what was your mindset on this play? So just, a great play. And, love to see the hustle on defense.
For sure. So now let's get into a guy that I also had a chance to sit down, talk with at the Senior Bowl for a little while. Very personable, fantastic guy to have a conversation with, really funny. And he's kind of, it seems to be more hit or miss for some guys. Some people love him, some people don't. But for me personally, I really like what he can bring to the table. There are some questionable things on film. He does kind of get beat occasionally a little bit more for my liking, but I do think he has the ability as well as he keeps developing in his position. And that's Stanford cornerback Kyu Blue Kelly. I know this is a guy that you also highlighted before we talked on the show. So just kind of curious to get your thoughts on Kyu.
Yeah. So great ball skills, first of all. Another guy that doesn't have the greatest speed, he kind of lacks recovery speed. So I almost wonder if a switch to safety might even be in store for him. He's really patient, though, at the point of attack. Like I kind of mentioned, he has great ball skills. So when he does get into that receiver, turns around, he can make plays on the ball. He needs to work on a little bit of his aggressiveness in the run game. I didn't see him too eager to go after those guys.
He does not like to tackle. He
Yeah.
does not like to tackle people.
So that probably will make him one of those guys that Ballard's kind of like, if he's there, if he drops a lot, maybe we'll take a shot on him and see if we can get that to come out in him a little bit more. The Colts seem to like Stanford players. So, obviously Bobby Okereke, Henry Anderson from a few years ago, just those type of
Luck,
guys.
they like.
Yeah, well, of course, Andrew Luck. That one I think would, regardless of college, but yeah, so you never know. I think Caillou is a great player. I think, it's just maybe he needs to switch to safety. I think you definitely give him a chance at corner first, though. He's just not the most tremendous athlete as compared to guys like that we've highlighted already.
Yeah.
So definitely a good player, though.
Yeah, and you really that's kind of what I was alluding to, is like you see it on film a lot where he does kind of get himself into sticky situations on when he gets taken deep quite often. Just he doesn't have that recovery speed that once you get behind him, it's pretty tough living for him. And if you're not going to be like, if you're not going to have that recovery speed, you at least need to make the effort, to get the ball carrier. And he's a guy that just seemed to want to avoid contact a little bit, especially there in the run game. So I don't know how that necessarily plays well with him going forward, but there is also a lot to like you said. I mean, anytime you can have a DB with ball skills, I mean, like that's the single most impactful play other than scoring a touchdown, and that's getting the ball back to your offense. And that's something that he does do at a very, great level. So let's kind of go ahead, pop the film on, see what you see here. And if you did not know, if you follow along, he is at the top of your screen, and let's just follow and see what happens. And this is USC, so this is Caleb Williams as well.
Yeah, so we see that aggressiveness right off the bat, punching both hands there in press coverage, trying to knock. I can't tell that, honestly, could be Jordan Addison, looks about to be the same size. Could be, but he kind of knocks him off his pins. Definitely surprises the wide receiver. That's something they don't always expect, is to get jammed right off the ball. But then, he jumps to the outside there real quick. He's obviously expecting an outside release there. And then he kind of gets beat a little bit, but he stays in phase pretty well, which is really good to see. But yeah, you like to see that aggressiveness. He's very patient. He's a good press corner. It's just, once those guys get vertical, sometimes it's hard for him to stay that sticky in those situations. And as you can see, that ball right there where you have it paused, that's a completion in the NFL for 25 yards, because that's open. That's very open in the NFL. That window is way too wide. But, if you could sit them and say, hey, play cover 2, knock the guy like you did right there, just sit in that short zone, knock the guy off, and then just try to use your instincts and go undercut short routes. That's something I think he'd be really good at, and just beating up wide receivers like you see there right off the bat, because he's obviously a very good press there.
Yeah, and what happens too as the quarterback, because that's all it takes sometimes, is just like that slight hesitation to throw that ball with anticipation. As you can see here, like Jack was saying, this is open in the NFL. But that slight hesitation from Caleb Williams lets Caillou get Black into play here. And at this point, there's nobody open. So he missed his open man. And this play, due to the recovery, one of the few times that he did actually, stay and recover, that this turns into a sack. This is a coverage sack right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this ended up being a good rep. I think, honestly, what saved him here was that he messed up the timing of the route there, because he made that receiver take a step back when he double hand punched him. So even though he technically was open, it just threw it off. And that's sometimes all you need, is that split second, because with the rush and everything happening, and when the quarterback hits the back of his drop, he's already off that progression, just because, you knocked him off for a few seconds, or in this case, like a half a second.
Yep, and that's all it takes. So he's a guy, to me, like, in what round would you kind of feel comfortable with the Colts taking a shot on him?
So I think he will go probably before the Colts will be willing to take a shot on him, because I think some teams will have a bigger grade on him, just because, they think he also has that positional versatility. I would be fine with the Colts taking him in round 4. I just don't think he'll be there. I think he'll probably go around round 3. I'll call another name that he kind of reminds me of from the same school, a guy I really liked a few years ago who's now on the Saints, Paulson Adebo, who went to the Saints in the third round. I think that's kind of the same thing, kind of the same player. Not Paulson was a little bit bigger than Caillou, but both had pretty good length and both had a little bit of deep speed concerns. But yeah, I kind of see shades of the same player in those two.
Yeah, and to me, yeah, I think like the fourth round is where I would feel kind of more comfortable taking him, possibly even if they did trade back and get kind of a later fourth or fifth. But I don't necessarily know, like you said, if he would be available there. But I think it would end up being a really good pick for the Colts if they were to select him somewhere around there. And he's a guy that, like you said, can also fit in that kind of cover three man scheme and as he can kind of continue to learn a little bit. So now let's get into our last guy here, the last DB on our list. And this is a guy that I wasn't necessarily really familiar with, but as I've started breaking down the DBs, like, and this was like multiple Maryland DBs too. So this wasn't just this guy, like multiple Maryland guys kind of really jumped to me. But this was the one that really jumped off the film to me, and that's Deonte Banks coming out from Maryland.
Yeah, and both these Maryland DBs are guys. We're actually just going to cover Deonte Banks, but Jacorian Bennett too, another guy the Colts could look at later. Deonte Banks is that guy that I think will probably go earlier. Some have him going in round one, but he could also fall into day two. Doesn't necessarily. He's not the biggest guy. He definitely has adequate size. He has a little bit of shorter arms. I think it's 31, right around there, and he's about 6 foot. But this guy is an elite athlete. Really just size, speed, athleticism for days. Has a ton of upside. Just a guy that I could see winning in multiple different ways. And again, you get him on the field really early in special teams. But he just has so much upside, so much. He could take his game to a whole different level just because of all of the athleticism that he possesses. So, yeah, Deonte Banks is somebody, again, I don't know if he's going to fit Chris Ballard's mold of what he exactly wants, but it's somebody that I would love to see the Colts take early there in the second round.
Yeah, and he's a fantastic athlete. So what was funny is he was listed at 6'2" at Maryland. He was at the combine, measures in right at 6 foot. So a couple inches is a pretty big difference, but still, a little bit over 31-inch arms, but his athleticism was just phenomenal at the combine, tested extremely well, ran a 4.3 and then a 1.5 10-yard, 42-inch vertical and 11.4 broad jump, which is just crazy explosion and speed. So he's a guy that can really stay on top of guys and can recover very well. And let's get in here and see what you have to think. So this is the Maryland SMU game from this season. You can kind of see, let's get everything set at the top of your screen here where the yellow arrow is. If you want to follow along, we can watch this play. And you can really see that explosion just right out the gate.
Yeah, great makeup speed here. A little bit of an underthrown ball here. I think that's Tanner Mordecai back there for the Mustangs. But besides that, yeah, he gets beat a little bit off the line of scrimmage there. But the makeup speed's great. He does tend on film a little bit to panic sometimes when his back's to the ball. But here we see that he actually does a really good job of breaking up the pass, looking back, making sure that this is not a deep completion. The other thing is if this receiver was to catch the ball, he's not going to go any further because Banks obviously has the speed to make him stay right there. So, he's one of those guys that he can run somebody down from the opposite side of the field, kind of like what we saw with Darius Rush. And, yeah, just a guy. He's got really fluid hips, great feet, and somebody that I think will immediately step in and contribute. Again, we keep saying it, on special teams, even if he's not going to step in and, be that cornerback too right away.
Yeah, and just to me, like the ability he has to take away that deep ball, because that's where this game is heading now. And teams are really starting to attack guys deep, and they're really focusing more on kind of like how the NBA is now, where you're either getting a slam dunk or you're shooting a 3-pointer. And that's really kind of where the NBA is heading, where these 3-point shots that team or the NFL's heading is like, these are these 3-point shots these teams are taking. And that's just, these wide get guys on islands and let's just throw the deep ball and make a cornerback go make a play. And you can kind of see, even though it is underthrown, that he is still able to go up, get his head around, and go make a play on this ball.
Yeah, and this is another guy that wouldn't surprise me if he snuck his way into round one. I don't even know if sneak is the right word. I think this is a guy that some expect to go in round one. He has all of the traits to do so. Really, even you can just see in his fluid transitions that these are just things that if he harnesses in, like, again, dynamite here at wide receiver, he's probably one of the few guys out of the guys that we've talked about, besides I would say Keely Ringo, who have legitimate quarterback or cornerback one upside. You could maybe throw Julius Brents in that category as well. But Deonte Banks, yeah, I mean, just very explosive athlete. Just needs to work a little bit more on his route recognition. Really just playing the game more, I think, would really benefit him. Something kind of like, and I've been making these school comparisons all day, but, kind of like we saw Nick Cross. He's this really good athlete, has this really high upside. But he still has to play the game a little bit more. He's really young, and then we can see him be one of the best players in his position if he develops.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see how this plays out in the NFL draft. But just like the wide receivers, I am curious to get your thoughts. If you had a chance at all these guys, say they're all sitting there, we'll just say they're at the second round. All these guys are possibly available there at pick 35 where the Colts pick. Who would you love to see the Colts go for? And I imagine we might have the same answer here.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would go with Julius Brents. I kind of alluded to it earlier at the beginning. But, a great consolation prize in my mind would be the guy we just covered, Deonte Banks. If he's still sitting there at 35, I'd be slightly surprised. But that's the guy. Those are the two guys I would not trade back for if they're on the board. If Julius Brents is there at 35, Deonte Banks is there at 35, I don't care. I want one of them. But Brents, I think, gets the probably is the apple of Chris Ballard's eye just because of his length, his hometown connections, and just his ability as a great athlete and somebody I think they could mold into a really good cornerback too within like 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. Julius Brents would be that guy for me as well, just with the length, the explosiveness, the way he just plays the game at just such a physical level, his ability as a tackler, even to where he's just not afraid to get in there and mix it up. I've even seen plays where he takes on pulling guards and it really blows up the play, even from an offensive lineman. So I just love that type of stuff on film, love the effort and the strength he plays with and the length. And I just think if you can refine that technique with him, you can bring a hometown kid home and be a hometown hero. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out. I think DB, we would probably agree, outside of the quarterback position, is the most needy position for the Colts.
Yeah, it's
the right word there.
Yeah, it's a huge pressing need for them. I kind of expect them to sign someone, whether it's after the draft or before, just somebody, because right now you've got Isaiah Rodgers, Kenny Moore, and then Dallas Flowers. Now, Dallas Flowers is a good player for us, probably rose above expectations as a returner, but I don't know if you can say, hey, Dallas, you're going to be the number 2 cornerback going into training camp next year. Maybe if he earns it, obviously he has the potential to do so. But I don't think Chris Ballard is going to leave Gus Bradley hanging dry like that, where he's forcing him to play a second-year undrafted free agent who went to a D2 school, not to, to his detriment, but not trying to call him out or anything. But, I just think you got to add a few more pieces to that DB room.
Yeah, this is a position I also agree. I think they double dip in free agency and in the draft. And you really want to have that positional versatility there, very similar to wide receiver, where you have different guys that have different skill sets that can play multiple roles, because you never know at that position when a guy is going to go down. We've seen it happen just about every year now for the Colts, where they end up suffering some sort of injury in that DB room, whether it's at safety, whether it's at cornerback, and some guys are just kind of forced to play. So you really kind of need to develop and continue to add to that room after the Stephon Gilmore trade.
Yeah, and one way I'd love for them to do that is go out and sign Shaquille Griffin. I think he's still available in the free agent market.
He is.
They got cut. He played in Gus. He didn't play for Gus Bradley, but he played in the same system-esque with the Seahawks. So if Chris Ballard goes out and signs Shaquille Griffin, and then drafts Julius Brents, oh my gosh, the DB room just got like 100 times better.
Well,
So
I do know they were in on Shaquille Griffin even before he signed with Jacksonville. You know, obviously
exactly.
the money ended up being a deciding factor there for him to go to Jacksonville, but the Colts were in on that hunt as well. So we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition now that he's available once again. Still a younger cornerback, but I think pairing him with one of these really great rookies at the top of the second round could really transform this DB room overnight here in the next 30 days.
And we've seen success in that same vein with Xavier Rhodes, a good cornerback who then got cut by his original team. And then Chris Ballard swoops in and signed him. Same thing with Stephon Gilmore. Shaquille's not quite as old as those two when the Colts signed him, but that late April, early May signing, either before or right after the draft, would make me feel a little bit better about the Colts cornerback room.
Yeah, and don't forget also, I mean, this could be a position as well that could be gone late into August. I mean, I believe Kenny Moore was signed in August after the initial cut downs from the Patriots. They kind of signed him after those initial cut downs. So you're always looking to add to that DB room with the way that offenses are performing these days, and the just depth of talent at the wide receiver position in the NFL right now. I don't know if it's ever been better. So you need these special DBs, and you need the athleticism and the size and the ability to really help minimize the damage that's coming from this offensive league that the NFL has now become.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And, hopefully the Colts go out and make a few more moves there at the position because, like we said, they kind of are in a little bit of a desperate need for it. But as we've seen, Chris Ballard never seems to panic. I know fans don't really like the way that he goes about this and kind of just leaves these needs open. But I'm sure, he'll make a few more additions before training camp kicks off. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, this ends this episode of our 2023 NFL draft preview and breakdown. We will be back, I believe. My birthday is actually next Tuesday whenever we have scheduled videos. So I will be out to dinner, but we're going to try to work, see if we can get it done Monday. And we'll kind of just see how the schedule goes. There will be an announcement. So you guys will know in advance whenever we are going live. But now this comes into one of my favorite positions here to break down, and that is the offensive line and defensive line class. So we will be having that next week. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Any closing words before you get out of here, Jack?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to comment earlier, but thanks so much for your kind words. It's a blessing to be working with you too. Everybody, Landon is a great mind as well in the draft community, doing a lot of great stuff. So if you don't already, go follow his work. He knows what he's talking about. And I'm just kind of the startup guy here, just trying to get my words out there. And then real quick on the offensive line, another one of my favorite positions to break down too. If you want to go back, I wrote a few articles on scouting some offensive linemen last year on the Blue Stable. Actually, I'll give myself a small pat on the shoulder. I identified Braxton Jones when no one else was talking about him. I thought he would be, probably a good starter. Not even necessarily at the Bears. He's now the Bears left tackle, but I thought he would be, probably a starter in year 2 or 3 out of Southern Utah. Just really excited to break those guys down with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And luckily, I have you here to make me look good. If you haven't already checked out Jack's work, please go follow him on Twitter. Twitter handle is right here underneath his name. So give him a follow. Go check out his work on the Blue Stable. And we will make sure, if you haven't already, if you like this type of content, make sure to like, subscribe, follow the Blue Stable on Twitter as well if you're watching this on Twitter. And we cannot wait to be back next week with you guys celebrating 1 week closer to the NFL draft and 1 week closer to hopefully a new quarterback. So super excited about this. And we'll have some special announcements as well on the way about the Blue Stables draft coverage. So just stay tuned for that. But outside of that, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next week.